All right, so thank you. All right, we've all got that. We're now being recorded. Very good. Thank you again for attending the presentation, which is being brought to you by Clark County Green Neighbors, as Erica mentioned, and the WSU Extension Master Gardeners of Clark County. And I'm Janis McBride. I'm going to be your host tonight. Today, what we're going to be discussing is the history of lawns and current trends, the benefits of replacing a lawn with a diverse landscape, planning and design, go over a little bit of that, some lawn alternatives ideas, and then the meat and potatoes of my presentation is the methods. Then we're going to get to the fun part with some before and after photos. So as far as history, lawns most likely originated as an enclosed pasture, right, for communal livestock grazing. And they wanted to separate that from the field for agriculture. And voila, when you have grazing, you have a lawn. Historically, in medieval times, lawns became valued by aristocrats because the cleared area then allowed those who were approaching a clear view. You could see who was coming, basically. During the 1700s, European lawns were associated with wealth because the owner basically would have to have a labor force. Before 1830, lawns had to be cut manually using shears or a scythe. And a lawn showed that the landlord could afford to keep land that was not being used for a building or in use for food production. It's like the landowner basically had excess land to waste. As at the same time, wealthy families begin mimicking those European gardens, wealthy families in America. Then we had intensive post-World War II suburbanization, and that went hand in hand with lawns and lawn maintenance because low-cost mortgages resulted in massive blue-collar housing developments. Front lawns were installed to mimic the upper middle-class homes, and whether it was from sod or seed, a lawn was very easy for home builders to install. That's also when the lawn care industry boomed. I love movies, and so I love to talk about the history of lawns in movies and books. They're used in films like Pleasantville and Edward Scissorhands to establish the characters' moralities and conformity to society. Another one in The Great Gatsby, the book, an unkept lawn of Gatsby's neighbor troubles him so much that he sends his own gardener over to mow it. Thereby, he's establishing uniformity and conformity of his neighbor. Current statistics and lawn trends. Lawns are the #1 irrigated crop in the United States. It's not really a crop because we don't eat it. There are 3 times more lawns than corn, which is the #1 human consumption crop. The perfect lawn has become a lower priority for many Americans, and there's now a no-mow movement. So now in general, Americans are moving toward a trend of desiring community green spaces, but not necessarily your own green lawn. So we have come to our first poll, and Erica is going to show a poll here. And the question is are you currently considering reducing or replacing your lawn? And then also, if yes is the main reason, what is the reason? Lower maintenance, aesthetics, saving water, or you want to be environmental friendly? So it looks like 86% of you are considering reducing or replacing your lawn, and 13% are thinking maybe. We don't have any no's, so that's great. You guys are coming to the right place. Most of you said you want to be more environmentally friendly as your reasoning. Saving water and aesthetics were important, but lower maintenance was a second to the environmentally friendly. All right, yes, and environmentally friendly. Very good. I'm going to click this down and move on with the presentation.
I've closed the poll, Janice. Did it close for you?
It did close for me, but I'm not able to move forward in my slide.
I'm not sure why. We might ask you to stop sharing and then resharing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll just do that real quick. Okay, very good. I'm back on. So now I want to talk, actually, before we start talking about some of the reasons why you would want to replace your lawn, actually some of the benefits of a lawn. We want to give fair and equal time for both sides. Lawns actually do play a very important role in urban and suburban environments. They provide soil erosion control. They provide carbon sequestration. It cools the environment much more than hardscapes. And it's a great place to exercise and play. And as you can see here in Houston's Deck Park, what they've done, and this is kind of a trend in a lot of large cities, they've replaced the hardscape with a beautiful, basically lawn and trees and garden, and it's much more usable space. Okay, so now let's discuss some of the benefits of reducing or replacing your lawn. First off, saves water. A lawn requires a minimum of 1 to 1.5 inches of water per week in order to stay green. Other established plants do not need as much water. So another benefit is that you're going to end up with fewer products. Okay, a typical lawn care requires fertilizers, pesticides, and that's in the form of weed killer, moss killer, and any other pesticides. And the National Resource Defense Council let me know that lawns in the US use 3 trillion gallons of water, 200 million gallons of gas in the way of lawnmowers, and 70 million pounds of pesticide annually. So a diverse plant palette normally requires far less chemicals than that. Another reason for a lawn reduction would be that it is better for your community. Lawns have an increased amount of runoff pollution, right? And it carries the pollutants, which is fertilizers, pesticides, and animal droppings, away to the streams, wetlands, rivers, and lakes. So a diverse plant palette is going to reduce runoff and protect the environment beyond your property. As seen here in this photo, this is Lacamas Lake, which is right near me. And they have a very big problem with urban runoff, and the community suffers because of this. Another benefit is wildlife habitat. Right now, if you have lawn, you're providing very little habitat for wildlife in the form of birds and beneficial insects. It offers little access of food for pollinators. So a diverse plant palette is going to provide habitat for wildlife and food for pollinators. Maintenance. Lawns do have a relatively higher amount of maintenance in the form of mowing, edging, weeding, treating, aerating, and watering, whereas a diverse landscape can be lower in maintenance. If you choose a high maintenance yard, then it's not going to be lower maintenance. So this is a relatively speaking as far as maintenance. Another benefit would be heritage. If you're replacing a lawn with native plants, this is going to add to the natural heritage of your area. So our next poll, what is one of the benefits, if you want to guess, of reducing your lawn that surprised you? Are there any of those that I just mentioned that surprised you? Okay, very interesting. We probably have enough to come up with an answer here. It looks like heritage was a surprise. So that's interesting. That was definitely one I kind of threw in there at the last minute. Everyone pretty much knew that replacing a lawn is going to save water and require very few products, which is great. Also, they knew it was going to provide habitat, but maybe they didn't think about the rest of the community. It is better for the whole community because you're not having those products run off your property. Okay, we'll close that and see if I can get started again on my, yep, I did. All right. So now we'll talk briefly about pre-planning and design, or planning and design, which basically can be an entire course unto itself, but it is a bit beyond the scope of today's course. But we're going to take a big picture look and consider the following about your project. All right. So is this going to be a total or partial lawn removal? And will the project be done all at once or gradually with several stages? If it's a partial removal, will the remaining grass be easy to mow? And that's a part that one of my family members made sure I mentioned because they do the mowing here. And they said, sometimes people do a project, but you end up with little spaces that the mower won't fit. So be sure you consider that. A good way to start is to consider installing islands within a lawn. And here are some really nice examples of that. As you can see, these homes, the owners decided to install an island of different plants instead of take out the whole lawn. So it's definitely a good start. Here's some more examples. Once again, make sure you leave room for that mower. And beautiful landscaping where you're keeping some of the lawn, but you're adding much more diversity. So when you're planning and designing, you do want to prioritize space for the humans, okay? Do you have kids? Do they play sports? Do you have pets? Do you have a family member who likes the lawn? Do you need space for lounging or for entertaining large groups? Do you want space for raised beds or maybe a shed and a greenhouse? These are all kind of human factors that need to be worked in before you even start thinking about plants. Now, keep in mind your priorities are dynamic and that what is the priority now may not be the same in 10 years. Kids grow up and no longer need space, or maybe you purchased a home from previous owners and their priorities weren't the same as yours. So then the next part, you want to think about a style that you want. There's a variety of styles, and a little thought and planning will result in success and cohesiveness. Some examples being natural and wild, or cottage garden, manicured trees, shrubs, and ornamental grasses versus the wild look, or maybe a very minimal and modern look, as shown in the lower picture. So as far as utilizing resources, this is another thing you want to use as part of your planning and design. There are free online garden design tutorials available. Both Lowe's and Home Depot have robust online garden design and garden project tutorials. So definitely take advantage of those. There's also many online videos, such as how to install a paver walkway, how to install a floating deck. Utilize online things like Pinterest for ideas. And then I strongly suggest that you visit some demonstration gardens. I happen to work at the Pacific Park Garden in Vancouver, and we're working hard on getting all the different varieties of gardens there ready for people to view and get some ideas. So then some things to consider when you finally drill down to the plant choices are scale. When you choose a plant, you want to think about the size of that plant at maturity. You want to start with your trees and then your shrubs and drill down from there. You always want to try to achieve some vertical diversity within your landscape. So you've got things that are tall, things that are medium, and things that are low. When you're choosing a plant, you want to consider sun exposure. Certain plants do well in shade and certain plants do not. Certain plants need full sun. You want to consider the drainage of the area. And then you want to group types of plants that have the same water needs together so that you're not watering everything. And then some plants that could do with less water are getting watered needlessly. You can consider color schemes and then bloom time if you want blooms throughout the seasons. But basically, you want to put the right plant in the right place. So as far as a summary on the planning and design, we talked about scope of project, identifying space for different components, choosing a style, utilizing all your resources, and then you want to think about choosing the right plant for the right place. So now let's discuss some lawn alternatives. If you like the look of a lawn, you might want to consider a meadow lawn. These types of lawns are mowed infrequently to a height of 3 to 5 inches. They can withstand dry summers without much water. They only require 2 inches of water per month. They don't need fertilizer. They attract pollinators. And an example can be seen at the ptlawnseed.com. That's a local company. And they sell one called Fleur de Lawn. They also have some other ones that are more apt to be used when you have some traffic on those. Okay, so if you have, they have a one specific for dogs and one specific for people. And so if you're interested in that and you like the look of a lawn, this is an alternative. Another alternative is ground cover. As you can see in these pictures, the ground cover spreads and it covers the soil so that you don't get weeds. And it looks very nice. It's a little bit taller than a lawn. And then of course, there's the cottage garden. When people say they're going to go ahead and remove their lawn, most people immediately think they're going to put in a cottage garden. But if you don't want all that busyness, and they can sometimes feel a bit chaotic, and they're very extreme compared to a lawn. So just remember, there's a lot of alternatives. You can add space, open space, by using other elements, and bringing in those other elements can bring order and more of a feeling of intentionality. So you can use wood chips and mulch. You can use pebbles, hardscapes like pavers, limestone, and rocks. It all depends on what you like. So here's a really good example that's using just about all of the elements that we've discussed. It includes vertical diversity with the trees, and then shrubs, and then ground covers. It's got a meadow lawn, and it's also got rocks and pavers. And I think this is just one of the best pictures of a landscape that I've ever seen. Another lawn alternative is raised beds. And people think raised beds are usually just for vegetables, but raised beds can be used just for flowers too. You can grow a veggie garden instead of a lawn, and then you can also put in raised beds. And then don't forget, once again, make space for the humans. Patios, fire pits, water features, gazebos, swing sets, a pet run, sheds, hot tubs. Those are all things that are going to take the place of your lawn. Now, we're going to now go on to the methods section, but before we talk about this, I want to review this, what's called the productivity triangle. And whereby when you're working on any project at any time, you can only have two of the three factors that are shown here. We've got quality, cost, and time. And so for any project, pick two because you can't have all three. If you have high quality at a good cost, it's basically probably going to be pretty slow. If you have high quality, but it's expensive, right? High quality, sorry, in a low amount of time, it's going to be expensive. So you're not going to have the advantage of cost. And then for the last thing, if you have, it's quick, so you have time on your side, and it's cheap, then you probably are going to get poor quality. So as I move on to the methods, just think about these things. All right. Let's discuss the first method. I call it the brick flip. It's not a name that I think I saw out there, but I called it that because I use this method. You're basically going to be using a sawtooth step edger to cut in rows. Then you cut the rows into manageable bricks. Using a flat shovel to cut the bottom of the brick to the 8-inch depth, then you flip that brick so that the sawed side is down. That gets covered with compost mulch. Here's some advantages. It is a low-cost method. It's very effective. It's environmentally safe. It retains soil structure, and it can be used for a large area if you have a large enough labor force. And then also you can plant immediately. The disadvantage is it does take a lot of labor and it is not super easy. Depending on the size, it may take a lot of time. And if you don't have enough mulch on the top layer, there can be grow back through the spaces between bricks. The second method I'll discuss is the cardboard sheet mulching method. Starting in the fall, the lawn would be mowed as short as possible so that the cardboard lays flat. The lawn is covered with several layers of cardboard or newspaper and assuring that no light can enter. The cardboard is then wet, and then a 4-inch layer of mulch is applied. Then plant in the spring. Starting in the fall would result in degradation of the cardboard or newspaper to the point where you can actually then dig right into it and it doesn't need to be removed. Or you can remove whatever pieces are left. Here's an example from one of our master gardeners. We have this on the left, a kind of odd shaped lawn there. Looks like it's kind of hard to get the mower in there. And so what they've done is they've covered it with the cardboard and then covered it with the mulch. I do see snow on the ground, so it looks like they may have started a little past fall, but that's okay. They'll just take it out a little longer. So the advantages of cardboard sheet mulching, it's very effective as far as cost. It's effective as far as getting rid of the grass. It's environmentally safe. It does retain the soil structure, and it can be used for small or medium areas. The disadvantage, it does take time. It can take 6 to 8 months or more. It might be unattractive during the process, but if you're covered with mulch, around here, a lot of people have that as their whole landscape. So it's probably not a big deal. It's probably not a good choice for a very, very large area. You're going to have to make sure that mulch holds that down. And if it's windy, then that can get blown off. If not enough cardboard or mulch is used on top, then there can be grow back. You would need to add nitrogen back to your soil because the process of decomposition is going to deplete some of the nitrogen there. A kind of a hybrid is that we can do a cardboard for raised beds. If you're going to install raised beds, the cardboard method is very fast. You're just going to set the raised bed right on top of the cardboard and fill it with soil. If you do have moles in your lawn, you may want to consider installing a hardware cloth. Okay. And there's some great added advantages to doing raised beds ergonomically, and this is a very fast method. The Master Gardener Foundation did give a grant to the Maplewood Mosley Community Garden Project, and you can see it at this website if you like. They, as you can see from the photo, they laid down the cardboard, they installed some of the hardware cloth, and then they put the raised beds right on top of there. And it was just like, voila, we've got raised beds instantly. Okay, the next method we're going to discuss is called smothering or light exclusion. We're going to cut the grass very short and water, and then it gets covered tightly with black plastic, which is held in place with rocks or metal stakes. This gets left in place for 4 to 8 weeks, and then the plastic is removed and it can be planted, or you can wait and cover it with mulch and plant it later, either in the spring or fall. Another method similar is solarization. So in the first method, we used black plastic, and in this solarization method, you're using clear plastic. So this must be done at the beginning of the summer. The grass is cut very short and watered, same method, and it's covered tightly with the clear plastic, which is held in place with rocks or metal stakes. The temperatures under the plastic are going to reach 110 to 125 each day. It's left in place for 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the weather. The plastic is then removed and it can be planted in fall or covered with mulch and planted the following spring. So both of these methods basically have the same advantages and disadvantages. It has moderate costs because you do have to pay for the plastic. It is fairly easy, it is effective, and it retains soil structure. It's also environmentally friendly. The disadvantages is that solarization can only be done in sunny areas and when the weather is hot. So it really wouldn't work if you have under a tree. It may not be efficient for large areas, and it does take time. In fact, this reminds me, I wanted to mention to you about trees. If you have a tree in the center of your lawn, many of these methods are not going to work on the area right above the root zone, okay? Solarization would actually damage the tree roots that are right under the soil. So you don't want to use solarization on an area where you have tree roots underneath a tree. Basically, to remove lawn that's trying to grow under a tree, it's going to take maybe a hybrid of some of these methods and then just teasing out that lawn. Okay, our next method is a sod cutter. You basically rent a sod cutter, and those are about 120 a day. I checked on that. Cut the area revealing the soil beneath, okay? And then plant. So this is an instant method. There are manual sod cutters, which are more affordable and are good for small areas. So that's good to know. The advantages, it's very fast. It is good for large areas. It's efficient. It is better for soil structure than tilling. It's not as good for soil structure as some of the other methods we have mentioned already, though. And you can rent one, so you don't have to buy one. Disadvantages, it might not be that easy to obtain. You do end up with a pile of sod, and hopefully you compost that and don't just discard it, because that's a lot of nutrients going away from your soil. You do get some depletion of soil nutrients, and you may need to add nitrogen back, or the compost that you created with all your sod. There is some labor involved, especially if you're using a manual sod cutter. Okay, and then there's tilling. We would obtain a tiller, till the grass into the soil, and then till again until the grass and weeds sort of disappear. And then we go ahead and plant. The advantage of this is that it's fast, it's effective for large areas, it does till in the organic matter. The disadvantage, it's really not that effective at eliminating grass and weeds on its own. So used in combination, I would recommend covering with some newspaper and mulch and letting it sit until spring after it's tilled. It does negatively affect the soil structure. It can be costly, and there is some labor involved. And now we have vinegar or herbicides. Personally, I don't recommend these methods. And just a note, household vinegar is not effective and should not be used. Horticultural vinegar is an herbicide. And if you decide to use an herbicide, you would only apply that per the label directions. So what are the advantages of using an herbicide? Is it easy? I don't know. And as I talk about the disadvantages, you decide. It does take several applications, so therefore it may not be fast. There is quite a cost as far as buying the herbicide itself. So it's not very cost effective, and it's usually not effective enough to get to the roots. So it might not even do what you want it to do. The vinegar itself lowers the pH of soil, and it's not environmentally friendly. You can end up with runoff, and you can end up with drift if there's wind. So always follow the package directions if you are going to use this method. You would not want to use this for a large area. It would not be cost effective. You wouldn't end up doing that anyway. Okay, so I made this table. We've gone through a lot of methods, and just a little review of all the different methods. And I put the little green happy face if it was good for that category. And then the yellow one, which is if it's kind of questionable. And then the red one, if maybe that was the one disadvantage of it. So the brick flip method, it's good as far as cost, it's effective, but maybe it's not that easy. The cardboard method is good cost, it is effective, it is fairly easy, but it's not very fast and might not be good for large areas. Cardboard for raised beds is great. Can't use for large areas, which a raised bed is not a large area. So solarization and smothering has a little bit of a cost. It's not fast, but it is environmentally friendly. And sod cutter, there is a bit of a cost to it. It is effective though, and it can be pretty easy. Tilling has a relative cost. It's not that effective, maybe not that easy. And I put a yellow face on environment there because you are damaging the soil structure. Okay, and then vinegar and herbicide, high cost, not always effective. Easy, I don't know, because you have to keep reapplying it, therefore it's not very fast. So there's my table. Now we get to the fun part, before and after photos. I just thought I would insert a little bit of humor and levity here before we move on to our garden photos. Some before COVID and after COVID comics. All right. Okay, so here's the home of one of my fellow master gardeners. As you can see, this is the backyard, and in the photo on the left, very standard typical home might look just like yours. It has a small concrete pad and then a lawn and then kind of some plants along the fence area. So what they decided to do is start with an island. And as you can see there, they've got an area marked out. And then after, here's the after photos with the island there, and then leaving some of the grass. So they're just easing into this rehab. Along the fence, they just etched in more toward the lawn and added a lot more plants. Now this same lawn, this is the same yard, has, as far as the before picture here, kind of an awkward pathway. It's narrow, and then the little area next to the house is kind of awkward, really not enough to plant anything in it. And if you do, it's going to come out onto the walkway. So that's not good. So what they did is they removed that walkway and went ahead and put in these walk path stones, the walking stones with pea gravel. They extended it out so they have enough room now to plant things. And then all of the plants that are here over on the right is where then the lawn, the remaining lawn that after the island was. So now they've got the whole thing, no lawn left. Here's another home. This is the front yard. Very typical home that you'd see here around in the Pacific Northwest. And here's a close-up on the left and then the full view on the right. So both are before pictures. And for after, as you can see real quick from the before picture, the one on the right shows that there's really not a good pathway getting to that front door. Anyone coming to your house would have to kind of walk in the driveway and kind of scrape up against the car and get all dusty. And so that was kind of awkward. So they wanted to put in a walkway. So they've got the pea gravel and stepping stones. And then as you would look to the left, to the right, they've got another path there, and all inside where the lawn was, they've got just some starts of some plants. That's all going to fill in. This was taken pretty much right after it was done. And then here's another before picture. It's got some, looks like a dogwood and a few shrubs around the perimeter, and then the lawn in the middle. And so they wanted to take out the whole lawn. Still got the dogwood there in these after photos. The one on the left shows the dogwood still, and just starting out with some ground cover there. And then a couple years later, the ground cover is completely filled in. That's now the photo on the right. And you've got your grasses are growing higher and ground covers filling in and taking on some color in the spring. It's very nice. This is my yard. I had this on the photo on the left, you can see that I had a very odd kind of triangle area that was actually difficult to mow. It's on a slope and you had to kind of push the mower to get it all done. So we did the cardboard method. We waited, we didn't start in the fall. And so I was in a hurry. And so I ended up doing a combination cardboard and then the brick flip method. So this is the after photo, and I installed a veggie garden with some pavers to walk around, and I love it. And it's less to mow now. So here's another before and after. I just thought this was a good example. Just kind of grass that's not doing very well. And then they took out this really old brick kind of raised planter. And now we've got the photo on the right shows lots of vertical diversity. You've got trees, shrubs, ground cover. You've got different varieties of materials that they're using with larger rocks, smaller rocks, a paver walkway. It's just nice. And here's another one, the before, and this one is on the bottom, obviously. So once again, lawn that just doesn't have much going for it. A lot of rough spots, and maybe it's north facing or something like that. So the after Once again, we've got some vertical diversity with some trees, got some shrubs, and then a multitude of different materials, including mulch, large rocks, small rocks, and the nice little walkway. This is a picture of one of our pollinator gardens. If you like the cottage garden and natural garden look, this is just going to have so many pollinators and birds and everything going on, and it's very nice. Another one for inspiration, kind of a trickling rockway, right? But you've got space as well as the plants. So it's much more intentional yard than, say, the pollinator garden or a cottage garden. And then a fence with some just beautiful flowers here. Some of these flowers are so gorgeous. Another reason I suggest you go to some of the demonstration gardens. You want to go in the spring, the summer, the fall. You can see what's blooming at the time, and you can just pick from there. And I'd like to thank Meg Burtek, Joanne Roth, and Tony LeClaire for some of their before and after photos. And then Bonnie Bingle, Kathy Melson, and Julie Bruning for the pollinator garden photos that I was able to use here.